It's 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, and I'm staring at my phone screen, reading the same text message for the 100th time. Love you, Mom. Don't worry about me. Those 8 words from my son Tyler would haunt me for the next 14 days, echoing in my mind every sleepless night, every unanswered phone call, every moment I wondered if I'd ever see my boy again. Tyler isn't just my son, he's been my partner in survival since he was 12 years old. That's when his father David decided that being a husband and father was too much responsibility and walked out of our lives without so much as a goodbye note. While other kids his age were playing video games and worrying about middle school crushes, Tyler was helping me figure out which bills we could afford to pay late and reminding me to eat when I pulled double shifts at the diner just to keep our lights on. Now, at 25, Tyler has built a life I'm genuinely proud of. He's got his own apartment across town, a steady job as a mechanic at Rodriguez Auto Shop, and Carmen, his girlfriend of 2 years who makes him laugh in ways I hadn't seen since he was little. Every Sunday without fail, they show up at my door with groceries and stories, filling my small kitchen with the kind of warmth that makes all those hard years feel worth it. Which is exactly why that text message felt so wrong. Tyler has never, not once in 13 years, told me not to worry about him. When he broke his arm skateboarding at 16, he called me from the emergency room laughing about how epic his fall was. When he got laid off from his first job, he showed up at my house with pizza and a plan for finding something better. My son doesn't hide from problems, he faces them head-on, usually with that crooked smile that's gotten him out of more trouble than it's gotten him into. But something in those words felt different. Final. Like he was saying goodbye. I texted back immediately, "What's wrong, baby? Call me." The message showed as delivered, but he never responded. I tried calling 3 times that night, straight to voicemail. By Wednesday afternoon, when he missed his shift at the shop for the first time in 2 years, I knew something was terribly, impossibly wrong. The Tyler I raised would never just disappear. He'd never leave people wondering and worrying. And he'd certainly never ignore his mother for days on end. But as I stood in my empty house that Friday evening, listening to his voicemail message for the 10th time just to hear his voice, I had to face the truth I'd been avoiding. My son was gone, and I had no idea why. Little did I know that the answer was buried in our past, waiting under his bed like a time bomb that had been ticking for 13 years. Looking back now, I can see the signs I missed. They started about 3 months ago, subtle changes that I explained away because I wanted to believe everything was fine. Tyler's Sunday dinners became sporadic. First he was working overtime, then Carmen was feeling under the weather, then it was traffic or car trouble or any number of reasonable excuses that I accepted because questioning them felt like being an overbearing mother. His phone calls grew shorter too. Our usual hour-long conversations about everything and nothing became 10-minute check-ins where he sounded distracted, distant. When I'd ask what was wrong, he'd flash that same reassuring smile he'd been giving me since he was 12, the one that said, "I've got this handled, Mom, don't you worry," and change the subject. "Just work stuff," he'd say. "Nothing I can't handle." But I knew my son. The shadows under his eyes, the way his laugh didn't quite reach those warm brown eyes anymore, the way he kept checking his phone during our conversations, all of it told a different story than his words. Carmen was the first one to voice what I was trying not to think. She called me on a Wednesday evening, 3 days after Tyler's disappearing act officially began, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. "Mrs. Rivera, I haven't heard from Tyler since Sunday. He was supposed to pick me up for dinner Monday night, but he never showed. His boss says he called in sick, but he's not at his apartment and his phone goes straight to voicemail." Her breath caught. "This isn't like him. You know this isn't like him." I try to stay calm, try to be the rational adult. "Maybe he needed some space, honey. You know how men can be when they're stressed." "No," Carmen said firmly. "Mrs. Rivera, Tyler doesn't run from things. Ever. Something's wrong." She was right, of course. Tyler had never run from anything in his life. When his father left us, Tyler didn't retreat into his room or act out like some kids might. He stepped up, became my partner in keeping our little family afloat. When his best friend Jake got into drugs in high school, Tyler didn't abandon him. He spent months helping Jake get clean, even when it meant getting in trouble at school for Jake's mistakes. My son doesn't disappear. He shows up, he faces problems, he fixes things. So where was he? By Friday, I was making excuses to drive past his apartment complex, hoping to see his beat-up Honda Civic in the parking lot. By Saturday, I was calling the auto shop every few hours, asking if he'd shown up for work. Miguel, his supervisor, was patient but worried too. Mrs. Rivera, Tyler's never missed work without calling. And when he called in Monday, he sounded, I don't know, scared maybe? Different. Miguel paused. Has he said anything to you about trouble? Money problems, maybe? Money problems. The phrase hit me like a physical blow. We'd been poor for so long after David left that financial stress was my greatest fear, the monster I checked under the bed for even when things were going well. But Tyler was responsible with money, maybe too responsible. He saved everything, spent carefully, never took risks. No, I told Miguel. Tyler's always been good with money. But even as I said it, doubts crept in. Those missed Sunday dinners, the distracted phone calls, the shadows under his eyes. What if it wasn't work stress? What if Tyler was in some kind of financial trouble and was too proud to ask for help? My neighbor Helen Martinez found me crying on my front porch the following Thursday morning. Helen had been my rock through the worst years after David left, bringing casseroles when we had nothing and watching Tyler when I had to work late. Mija, you can't keep torturing yourself like this, she said, settling her sturdy frame beside me on the porch steps. If Tyler's in trouble, sitting here worrying won't help him. But what if something terrible has happened to him? The words came out in a rush, carrying all the fears I'd been trying to suppress. What if he's hurt somewhere, or worse? What if someone took him, or... Stop. Helen's voice was firm but kind. You know Tyler. He's strong, he's smart, and he loves you too much to just vanish without a reason. If he's hiding, there's a reason. And sitting on this porch isn't going to help you find out what that reason is. She was right. I had to do something. That's when everything changed. I'd been standing outside Tyler's apartment building for 20 minutes, clutching my spare key so tightly it left marks on my palm. Using it felt like crossing a line, violating his privacy in a way I'd never done before. But Tyler had been missing for 2 weeks, and my maternal instincts were screaming that something was desperately wrong. I knocked for 5 minutes first, calling his name through the door, hoping against hope that I'd hear his voice respond. The silence that greeted me was deafening. The moment I stepped inside, I knew someone had been there. Tyler's apartment was destroyed, not Tyler's usual organized chaos, but genuinely torn apart. Couch cushions were scattered across the living room floor, kitchen drawers hung open with their contents spilled everywhere, and papers were scattered across the dining room table like someone had been searching for something specific. My heart hammered against my ribs as I moved through each room, calling Tyler's name even though I knew he wasn't there. The silence felt heavy, ominous. In the bathroom, toiletries were knocked over. In the kitchen, cabinet doors stood open, cans and boxes scattered across the counters. I was about to call the police when something under the dining room table caught my eye, a crumpled envelope that had been overlooked in whoever had searched this place. With shaking hands, I smoothed it out, and my breath caught in my throat. The envelope was addressed to David Rivera. David Rivera, my ex-husband, Tyler's father, the man who had walked out of our lives 13 years ago and never looked back. The letter inside made my blood run cold. Final notice. Payment overdue, $15,000. You know what happens when people don't pay their debts to Vincent Torres. I read it 3 times before the words fully sank in. David owed someone $15,000. Dangerous money to dangerous people. But why was this letter in Tyler's apartment? Tyler didn't have $15,000. I knew his finances better than anyone. We'd always been open about money since the days when every dollar mattered for survival. With new purpose, I tore through the apartment, searching for answers. I found more envelopes in the kitchen trash, all addressed to David Rivera at various addresses around the city. The return address was always the same, Vincent Torres, with an address in the roughest part of town where even the police patrol in pairs. Each letter painted a more terrifying picture than the last. The threats escalated from financial penalties to increasingly violent language about what would happen to David and anyone helping him hide. The most recent letter, dated just 3 weeks ago, mentioned Tyler by name. "We know about your son. Tyler Rivera, 847, Maple Street, apartment 2B. If David doesn't pay, maybe we'll have a conversation with the boy about his father's debts." My legs gave out. I sank to the kitchen floor, surrounded by evidence of a nightmare I couldn't fully comprehend. How did these people know about Tyler? Why were they threatening my son over his father's debts? And most importantly, where was Tyler now? I was still sitting there, staring at the letters with trembling hands, when I heard footsteps in the hallway outside. My heart stopped, but then I heard a familiar voice calling out hesitantly. "Tyler? Are you home?" I brought Chinese food. "Carmen," I called out, scrambling to my feet. "It's me, Mrs. Rivera." She appeared in the kitchen doorway and took in the scene, me surrounded by scattered, threatening letters, the apartment torn apart, evidence of something far worse than a missing person case. Her face went completely white. "Oh God," she whispered, pressing her hand to her mouth. "You found them." I couldn't have prepared myself for what she told me next. "You knew about this?" The betrayal in my voice cut through the silence like a knife. Here I'd been going crazy with worry, and Tyler's own girlfriend had been keeping secrets. Carmen sank into Tyler's dining room chair, her hands covering her face. "Tyler made me promise not to tell you. He said he could handle it, that he was protecting you from getting hurt again." She looked up at me with tears streaming down her cheeks. "Mrs. Rivera, Tyler didn't disappear. He's hiding." The story she told me shattered everything I thought I knew about the past 3 months. David had contacted Tyler back in September, showing up at Rodriguez Auto Shop one afternoon like a ghost from our past. According to Carmen, Tyler had called her immediately afterward, his voice shaking. "My father's here," was all he could manage to say. Tyler said he looked terrible, Carmen explained, her voice barely above a whisper. Thin, desperate, like he hadn't slept in weeks. He told Tyler he was sick, that he'd made mistakes, but he'd changed, that he just wanted to make amends with his son before it was too late. But David hadn't really come back to reconnect. He'd come back because he needed money. He told Tyler about the gambling debts, Carmen continued. Said he owed dangerous people, and they were threatening to hurt him. He begged Tyler for help, said if he didn't pay, innocent people might get hurt too. Tyler, with that same protective instinct that had made him my guardian at 12, couldn't turn his back on his father, even a father who had abandoned him. He'd been systematically emptying his savings account, working double shifts, even borrowing money against his car to help pay David's debts. But Tyler's been so careful about hiding it from you, Carmen said. He didn't want you to know David was back because he knew it would hurt you. He thought he could fix everything quietly and you'd never have to know. The missing Sunday dinners, the shortened phone calls, the stress and exhaustion, it all made horrible sense now. Tyler had been carrying this burden alone, trying to save a father who had never been there for him while protecting a mother who had always been. 2 weeks ago, everything changed, Carmen continued, her voice growing stronger. These men came to the auto shop asking questions about David. Miguel said they looked like the kind of people you don't want asking questions about you. They wanted to know if David had any family, any connections in town. That's when Tyler realized his father had given these dangerous people Tyler's information, maybe even his address, as leverage or collateral for his debts. His father had put him directly in danger. Tyler panicked. He came to my apartment that night with a bag of clothes and all the cash he had left. He said he needed to disappear for a while until he could figure out what to do. Carmen's voice broke. He made me promise not to tell you because he said if these people thought you were involved, they might hurt you too. Where is he? I demanded, my voice carrying every ounce of maternal authority I'd ever possessed. Carmen hesitated. He made me promise. Carmen. I stepped closer, my hands clenched into fists. Those people are looking for my son because of money he doesn't owe for a man who abandoned us 13 years ago. Where is Tyler? She gave me the address of a roadside motel 20 miles outside town. But what I didn't know then was that David had already skipped town again, leaving Tyler to face the consequences of his father's choices alone. I found Tyler exactly where Carmen said he'd be, room 237 of the Sunset Motel, a rundown place where people go when they don't want to be found. When he opened the door and saw me standing there, his face crumpled like he was 12 years old again, trying to be strong but finally allowed to be scared. Mom, he whispered and fell into my arms. We held each other in that doorway for what felt like hours, both of us crying him with relief, me with the overwhelming gratitude of finding my son alive and safe. When we finally pulled apart, I could see how these 2 weeks had aged him. He looked thinner, exhausted, carrying the weight of adult problems he should never have had to face alone. I'm so sorry, Mom, he said as we sat on the worn motel room bed. I thought I could handle it. I thought I could protect you from having to deal with Dad again. We talked through the night. Tyler told me everything about David's sudden reappearance, his stories about being sick and wanting to make amends, his desperate pleas for help. Tyler had wanted to believe so badly that his father had become someone worthy of forgiveness that he'd ignored every red flag. He showed me pictures, Tyler said, his voice raw with emotion. Pictures of us when I was little, before he left. He said he'd kept them all these years, that leaving was the biggest mistake of his life. He cried, Mom. I'd never seen him cry before. But the tears had been just another manipulation. David had used Tyler's love, his desperate hope for a father's approval, to drain his savings account. And when the pressure got too intense, when dangerous people started closing in, David had disappeared again, just like he had 13 years ago. I kept thinking maybe this time would be different, Tyler admitted. Maybe he really had changed. Maybe we could finally have the relationship I always wanted. He laughed bitterly. I'm an idiot. You're not an idiot, I said firmly, smoothing his hair the way I had when he was small. You're loving. You're hopeful. Those aren't character flaws, baby. They're what make you extraordinary. Your father took advantage of those qualities because that's who he is, not because there's anything wrong with you. The next morning, we went to the police together. It turned out we weren't David's only victims. Detective Martinez explained that David had been running similar scams across 3 states, contacting the children he'd abandoned and using their love against them to pay his gambling debts. Tyler wasn't his first victim, just his most generous. The dangerous men who'd been asking questions were indeed connected to illegal gambling rings, but they weren't actually looking for Tyler. They were looking for David, who had apparently fled the state the moment he realized his creditors were closing in. We never heard from David again after that. Part of me was relieved. That was 2 years ago. Tyler moved back home for a few months while he rebuilt his savings and worked through the emotional aftermath of his father's betrayal. It wasn't easy. He was angry at himself for being fooled, angry at David for using him, and sometimes angry at me for being right about his father all along. We both went to counseling. Tyler needed help processing the complicated grief of losing a father he'd never really had, while I needed to work through my own guilt for not seeing the signs sooner. Slowly, with time and professional help, we both began to heal. Tyler and Carmen got married last spring. He's now the assistant manager at Rodriguez Auto Shop, and they're saving for a house. Every Sunday without fail, they come for dinner, filling my kitchen with laughter and stories about their week. Sometimes people ask me if I wish Tyler had never heard from his father again. The truth is, as painful as it was, I'm grateful it happened. Tyler needed to see for himself who David really was. He needed to learn that some people will use love as a weapon, and that protecting yourself from those people isn't selfish, it's necessary. Most importantly, Tyler learned that real love doesn't come with conditions or invoices. It doesn't disappear when things get difficult, and it doesn't manipulate or deceive. The love between us, built through 13 years of showing up for each other, proved stronger than the fantasy of a father who never really existed. Today, when Tyler tells me not to worry about him, I know he means it in the best possible way. He's learned to ask for help when he needs it, to trust the people who have proven they'll be there, and to recognize the difference between someone who says they love you and someone who actually does. Our family is smaller than Tyler once hoped it would be, but it's real, honest, and unbreakable. And sometimes that's everything.